sure all of our feeds are going all right. And oh, by the way, if you are watching from April's stream, she is in the background. So um, you can't see her, but she is waving at you. And you can see me and Kevin waving at you. All right, let me just share this
Waving on
real quick.
April's behalf.
Ooh, how about that? Let me share this real quick on my page. Hold on. All righty. I think I'm good on my end.
Good to go?
Cool, cool. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Happy, I guess, Labor Day weekend in advance. I know some of y'all are hopefully getting ready to get a little bit of rest, a little recreation, a little relaxation this weekend. But we are really excited to spend another end of the week conversation with you, unpacking some really interesting and insightful customer stories. My name is James Warren. I'm the founder of Share More Stories, and I'm really excited to be joined by my teammate, my friend, um, and Donald Glover lookalike Kevin Levin. Give it up for Kev Lev.
Thank you. I appreciate that intro. I will refute the Donald Glover lookalike claim, but enough people say it where I do understand where you're coming from.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you making some time to connect today, Kevin, and we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so sharing some of the experiences we've had connecting with our customers and exploring the experiences of their consumers, their employees, their communities through our work at Share More Stories and the Seek platform. So I don't know if you wanted to say a few more words from your perspective on what you want to get out of today.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to take the time to just say thank you for, you know, calling me up to bat because I think that what's underway with Share More Stories right now is really special, in part because the technology that Share More Stories has built is just super cool from a data standpoint, from a storytelling and story sharing standpoint. And I know with the newsletter that was just released last week and the second edition, which was released a little bit earlier this week, you're exploring the theme of charting your course and the importance of reimagining your business. And I think that that idea of reimagining your business is something that a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to. I think it's a really important aspect of just being and staying agile. And I was wondering
Mm.
if we could just take a moment to begin there and unpack, what is the importance of reimagining your business?
I mean, I love where you're going with that because I think, you know, that is definitely the journey we've been on as a company. Um, whether it was when I was working and leading large established brands and big companies or partnering up with an amazing team to build this business. I think sometimes you just have to the reimagination process I think is kind of ongoing. You definitely need a vision and you need a direction, a North Star. But getting there is not, it's not easy. It's not straightforward. It's not linear. And I think sometimes you have to sort of pause and be like, all right, um, where exactly are we? And where are we trying to get to again? and and I say it like that
Mm,
because sometimes you don't always feel sure. And I think the beauty of what you're asking about here, though, is this is true for, in my experience, leaders of all, you know, all types, all companies, all brands, all backgrounds. This notion of like, how do we constantly take stock of where we are, maybe course correct, and eventually it allows you to start to, as you make progress in that journey and you get to a new place in that journey, you see yourself differently, not just because you're in
Mhm.
a different place and you've grown and you've learned, but you start actually seeing yourself through the eyes of your customer or your organization. And I think that really changes you when you start to like drop the guard, drop the pretense of I've got it all figured out, to my customers and my employees actually know a part about me that I don't know. And if I open myself
Mm.
up, I could see some things through their eyes, which might give me more clarity around where I'm at. That's like, maybe that's a little deep to start us off at the lunchtime hour, but I really believe like that's part of the sort of meta journey that people who are building either new products, new teams, new movements, new
Mm.
ideas. I really think that's the journey that it's on, and I think this ability to reimagine is sort of an inherent flexibility that maybe it's a bit of a superpower that you kind of pick up along the way on that journey and say, hey, we're going to need some points. We're going to need some tools along this way where we can see things a little differently than we've been seeing them.
Well, on that exact point with some of those tools that could be used to help see both what is needed in terms of the customer journey and experience with products and services. I know that we had a story that a previous client was able to use the Share More Stories tool, the Seek app, to unpack some of their customer stories and experiences. Would you be able to unpack what our tool is and how the company that I'm loosely referring to
Yeah,
was able to use our application?
absolutely. So, I think one of the things we want to talk about today is an example in financial services broadly, the mortgage servicing industry specifically. And like we did last week, you know, participants come to us to share their stories about their experiences in a trusted way. And so we're doing the same thing here, right? We're sharing stories, but we're going to keep the companies that we're talking about anonymous because it's really less about who they are and it's more about what their story has to teach all of us. And so sometimes we can fixate on the who, and this is more about really diving into the why and the so what. So yeah, we'll talk about this company, and I think what I want our viewers and friends to really be thinking about is how would this apply to me? Like, have I ever been in a position, responsible for launching a new business or a new brand? And I thought I knew everything I needed to know about that customer, and it wasn't clicking. I mean, this is
Mhm.
like this is the story of business, right? Like we are all trying to differentiate, to create, to innovate, and 99.9999% of that doesn't go the way we planned. And so in this case, our customer was a mortgage servicing company, and they had done some really interesting things in terms of trying to really put a more human face on their business, really connect and engage with their customers in a deeper way. And one of the challenges, if you know anything about the mortgage industry, which we only knew it as customers, um, one of the things that happens a lot in the industry is right when you get a mortgage, if you buy a house, eventually your mortgage usually gets packaged and sold to another company that services it. And so when that happens, those companies, you didn't know them. You signed a form that said, yes, I give permission for my mortgage to be sold to another company, but you don't know who they are. They're not the company you use to finance your home, but they play a huge role, right, in servicing most people's mortgages. And that's what their specialty is. But one of the challenges facing that industry is when a person decides to either refinance their mortgage or sell that home and buy a new one, they're not really thinking that hard about how do I stay loyal to the company that I'm sending this ACH payment to once a month that I don't really know who they are and don't remember starting a relationship with them. They just bought my mortgage. They're not thinking like, I want to stay loyal to that company because they don't, it's a transactional relationship. And so a lot of people, when they are choosing their mortgage provider, they are going with what their friends recommend, their personal bank, or sometimes their realtor's got a recommendation. Or if they're buying new, the builder's got a deal with a lender. And so there's a lot of like very, very tight context for how people choose their mortgage providers. And if you're the person in that industry trying to either sell those services with differentiation, there's a lot of layers you got to break through, right? But they're all trying to innovate. So they're coming up with new tools, new products, new offerings. They're trying to figure out like, well, what else do you need in your home buying journey? Or what do you need in your home
Mm,
ownership journey? Or how can we build a relationship with you so that when it's time for you to buy a new home, you see us as the company you want to stick with? And it's a
mm,
tough task. And that's what this company was facing, was how to really break out from the pack and not be anonymous and not be a basically, almost a commodity without clear differentiation. Even if they had things that were interesting and different and unique, it's a struggle to break out in that industry and communicate those clearly. People might remember an ad for an interesting service, but brand recognition is really, really hard to come by. And relationship is really hard to develop. And I think those were two of the biggest challenges that were facing them when they came to us and said, how do we how do we increase loyalty in this industry? How do
mm.
we provide a reason for our customers to stay with us when they have one of these other major transactions come up in their lives? It was a really, really interesting, fascinating project, because not only did we get to really unpack their customer stories, we got to work with this company and help them put those insights into action in kind of like an all day innovation, strategic planning, game plan, jam session. So it was a fun, really fun engagement. And we learned a lot about the industry, but we also continued to really demonstrate the power of the human experience, the power of the human story in giving us a lot of insight and wisdom on how we can solve problems.
So, what kind of insights and strategies was that session able to glean to help this mortgage company transition from that transactional model of doing
Yeah,
business?
yeah. To I'll keep some of their strategic work product under wraps, but I'll hit the high notes. I think some of the things we heard and learned in those stories that really, really jumped out at us were how people make their decisions
Mm,
and what they are. It's not about so much where do I get my information from. Of course, that always matters, but it was more on the emotional side, like what drove them to feel like when they chose, say, a mortgage company or chose a real estate agent.
mhm,
What drove that? And both surprisingly and not surprisingly, it's for many, of course, it's things like what's the experience level of, if I'm looking at a real estate agent, which plays a huge role in who what mortgage provider you choose.
mhm,
Or if I'm looking at the bank, of course I'm caring about sort of these technical competencies like how good is the agent? What are their reviews? Who did I hear about them from? Of course you care about whether or not the bank or the lender is offering you a good rate. But what's driving, like what's actually underneath all of that is fear and trust. And
mm,
so you flip that around, right? The fear, you don't want to necessarily build from a place of fear. So it's like, well, what's underlying the fear? And what's underlying the fear is really the massive uncertainty. Like, am I about to make a bad decision? Am I about to, you know, lose thousands or tens of thousands of dollars because I didn't shop around? And so this
mm,
fear of like missing out on a better opportunity is really in a lot of consumers' minds, especially when they're shopping high price, high ticket items that have a long, once you buy it, you're in it for a long time.
mm,
And what we learned in this case is really the opportunity to differentiate is to leverage what they are doing in their personal lives around these decisions, which is build trust. So in their personal lives, they're not just asking for friends and family records just for grins. They're asking for that information because they don't know that they can trust this mortgage company or trust that realtor unless there is somebody speaking for them on their behalf. And
Mm,
so, you say, well, then that's a friends and families play. How do we do that? We said, well, it's more than just a friends and family play. It's actually figuring out what are the mechanisms of trust that are happening at a granular level in those micro interactions. How do you design those into your product experience, into your value proposition, into your messaging, so that when you are reaching out to these prospects and these customers, whether you know that they're about to refinance or they're shopping for a new home, which means they're going to need a mortgage, how do you really think about the levers of trust, the reinforcers of trust, and the instances where you can build trust? And that became really the frame for this company. And it was like the macro insight that everything else hung off of. Of course, we looked at customer segmentations. We looked at moments that are more likely to be trustable and trusted versus moments that are less likely. But at the end of
mm,
the day, it was sort of coming at this instead of from the functional point of view that says, I've looked at the data I have and I've modeled this, and these consumers are buying at this point in time, and this is their drivers, and our messaging should really be interrupting them or connecting with them at the right moment, but they're not converting because they're not seeing a message that instills and reinforces trust. That was the big insight coming out of that. And the beautiful part was because we heard it from stories, we were able to get granular examples on what trust looks like and feels like and how a company could build trust with these consumers. So it was really, really actionable at the end of the day.
mm. Hearing that has me wondering, what are some of the high level things that you've learned about what people find trustworthy? Like, how could a
Mm.
company that's trying to build trust start to think through that process? What could a company do to even strategically think about building trust?
Yeah. So, we often talk about like what are things that you can do and how can you do them at scale. And before I ever answer the question about what something looks like at scale, I actually ask
Mhm.
the question, what does it look like between two humans?
Mm.
Because, oh, by the way, we're already scaled. We're all over the place,
Right.
as you really know. So the real question is like, well, what do we do to and with each other in our human interaction that is positive and beneficial, that is worth repeating? And then
Right.
go do that, right? So at a minimum level, when I feel a higher level of trust, um, I am I am seeing a person who is showing me maybe vulnerability.
Mm.
We talk about some of our mistakes in our work because it's real talk. When somebody is showing you transparency and vulnerability, you question less if you're seeing the whole them, and you feel like, oh, okay, this person's trusting me by being real with me, so I can kind of trust them. Um, Consistency matters a lot. Once there's sort of an established relationship, am I being consistent in how I'm showing up? Or if things need to change, am I vocalizing that change? Am I leaning into sometimes difficult or uncomfortable conversations, or am I avoiding them? And I think at a human level, those are things that help us build and maintain and preserve trust. Every human makes mistakes, which means every company and brand on the planet is making lots of them. But the way we work through those mistakes is at a very human level. And so, can we say, hey, you know what? I messed that up. Um, that is one of the biggest ways to build trust quickly, not just because you messed up or because there's a crisis, because when you come to somebody and acknowledge that you messed something up or you made a mistake even before they spotted it, that is
Mm.
such a huge way you can build trust because it tells you this person really has my interests in heart and mind. They're not out to just have the advantage over me. So now scale that out to relationships inside organizations or between brands and customers, because those are the types of things that people don't turn off their humanity when they buy your product and service. People don't turn off their humanity when they go to work. If anything, they may stop coming to your place of work if they feel it doesn't support their humanity. but people are
Mm,
human all the time. So I think
yeah.
the best way to figure out how we do these things in the marketplace and in the organization is to look at what we're doing in our everyday interactions and relationships with each other. And then that's what we should scale. And so, in more practical terms, if you're a brand or a product, it's those same things, right? Like, what is your be as clear and as consistent as you can? Support people even when it's not always in your immediate interest to do so. Acknowledge the mistakes if you make them. Um, but provide be vulnerable, be honest, be open with them, even as a brand. Those are things that I think people can react to and relate to at a very human level. And that's what we've had to do as a company because
Mm,
we've been on this journey ourselves for a minute and we haven't always gotten it right either at the strategic level or at the product level, the execution level. And you know one of the things we said early in this process was we're going to learn in public, and learning in public is vulnerable. It would be easier to say we're not going to do anything till we think we've got it all figured out and then say, hey, big news coming.
mm.
But that's not what we're cultivating. That's not the kind of relationship we want to have with our customers and our participants and our stakeholders. We want them along for the journey with us because how can we talk about helping organizations learn through people's experiences and stories if we're not going to do that? So, we got to eat our own cooking. We got to be out there, vulnerable, learning. And sometimes, what you make tastes amazing, and you're like, can I have another? And sometimes you're
Yeah.
like, that didn't work out so well. Leave that on the back burner and hit DoorDash. It just depends on what happens. But you got to stay in that mode of learning, and learning is a trusting exercise because sometimes it's humbling, sometimes it's affirming, sometimes it's hopeful, sometimes it's scary. But it is. I think learning is one of the best ways. Being willing to learn and bringing other people on your learning journey is one of the best ways you can build trust because it's all those things we just talked about: mistakes, vulnerability, consistency. The consistency is we're going to keep learning together. So you think about the companies and the entrepreneurs and the brand managers and the customer experience managers, the ones, in my opinion, the ones who are really going to make a difference in their organizations and in the marketplace and in society are the ones
Mhm.
who are sort of boldly but humbly leading in that process, sort of showing up with confident humility and saying we don't understand all this about ourselves. We thought we knew ourselves, we thought we knew our customer, but there's parts of this we have not quite figured out yet, and I've got to be vulnerable and humble enough and open enough to be willing to learn some things that I didn't know, or unlearn some things that I thought I knew in order to find a better way forward, a better path forward.
I think that's really helpful, both personally and also for a lot of the entrepreneurs that are listening. So I want to thank you for that. I'm almost wondering in terms of that, you said learning is a trusting exercise, and that's recognizing the mistakes that have been made and being honest and forthright about that, the consistency piece. I suppose what's present for me right now is I'm wondering
Mm.
how does the Seek app help businesses recognize and embrace those different stakeholder perspectives alongside that trusting exercise, alongside that learning journey?
So that's why I love you, Kevin, because you take what I have to say and you like, this is great. Now let me make sure people can kind of bring this home. So I love that. Thank you for that.
That's actually the question on my heart right now,
But
so
that's also, I mean, that is one of your amazing talents. You are a synthesizer and you are a very intuitive communicator, and that's why I love working with you in this space. Um, the From a tool perspective, what we've recently rolled out with CCAP is really a platform where individual customers and users can come to the CCAP platform. They can set up their own projects and start engaging with and connecting with customers or employees almost immediately. And when we say engaging, we mean giving them a place where they can come in and share stories about their experiences, either with the product or the brand or the organization or an issue, and really dive deep into what their experience was, how it made them feel, and what they learned from it. And so
Mm,
then our customers are able to take those stories and analyze them in the platform. They're able to find out, well, what do these stories mean? Or how do these stories tell us how people feel about their experiences? What are the
mhm,
themes of these experiences? And what might we want to do about it? And so that's kind of the big piece that we've launched this year, is making that platform, which was always behind the scenes. We were using those tools to provide these types of research services to our clients and customers. Now we're putting that up front and saying, hey, you can leverage these tools and move at your own pace and learn in an iterative, scalable way, learn in kind of an agile way, right? Where you can really ask a question, get some answers, ask a different question. And
mm,
again, I think while that may not be for everybody, I think it's for the learner. I think it's for the innovator. I think it's for the person who's like, these current tools ain't cutting it for me. I'm trying to get at a different answer to a different question. I want to see ourselves differently in our consumers'
mm.
eyes or our employees' eyes. This is the kind of tool for people who want to do that kind of learning.
This is the tool for the learners, for the innovators, for the
Might be that might be
disruptors.
that might be on your next. For those of you who don't know, Kevin, we crack a little internal joke because Kevin's got that voice. I used to think I had the voice, but it's really Kevin. Kevin's the man on
You
the
do have the
street.
voice. You
Nah,
do.
you got the
We
voice.
can. We can both have the
We could
voice.
both have the voice. We could do a voice duet. We should both do a non-video. I think they have a word for that. It might be a podcast, Kevin. We might need
It
to do
might
that.
be a podcast. We might
Late
have
night
to. Yeah.
radio host. But Kevin has a beautiful ability to sort of see things out in the world and turn those into beautiful and brilliant stories himself. So, make sure when you watch this video, you follow Kevin on Instagram, connect with him on LinkedIn. What he does out in the world and brings back to the Share More Stories team is nourishment for us. He brings a lot of beautiful energy and soul to our work. Um, so I'm grateful for you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Truly.
Yeah,
Um,
I
do
made him go all quiet.
I am
I know we're
noticing
almost
that
at
we're
time, so I didn't know if you wanted to, have the last words, Kev.
well, I will share a concluding thought, but it might not be the last words. I just want to say again, like, I think that the work that Share More Stories is doing in part to help people approach business in a iterative and learning way. I think the emphasis on the journey, the emphasis on the significance of learning and being involved in that process of unpacking and really listening to what customers and clients are saying, and then being able to transform those stories into actionable insights. Like, I think that's really meaningful. And I'm glad that we were able to explore this particular mortgage service industry example today, because in my experience, if a mortgage service company can use insights from this experience to become more human in the way that they do business, that bodes pretty well for business at large. That's my thought.
100%, man. I mean, this is a different kind of research. This is moving from, sort of, I ask a question once a year, I get an answer, and I hope we make the next 364 days make sense. This is
Mm,
being in a place of constant conversation, dialogue, learning with your customers and in your employees. And I think, the way I see it is the world is waiting for us to make better experiences. Some of them won't wait too much
mm,
longer. They're just going to start making them on their own. And so companies and brands and organizations, that's what we're trying to do, is help you really show up for humans the way we all deserve, with better experiences. And that starts with better insights. So
mm.
that's what we're trying to do.
Mic drop.
Appreciate you. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you
Enjoy
all
your
for
Labor Day
tuning in.
weekend.
Yeah, 3-day weekend ahead. Talk soon. Bye.